Welcome back to The Bottom Line, the podcast where we uncover how business agility, transformation, and strategy intersect to drive value at scale. I'm Christabel Singh, and today we are going to be diving into how agile transformations drive real business results. Joining me is Lindy Quick, Safe Practice Head at KnowledgeHut, who's helped organizations move beyond agile rituals to measurable impact, revenue growth, efficiency, faster innovation, the works, and she's done this across industries. Lindy, thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Christabel. I'm super excited to be here as well. It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. To kick this off, Lindy, many say they are doing agile, but they struggle to see business wins. And in today's session, we're hoping to change that. So, to get started, from your experience, what's the biggest gap that you see between agile adoption and true business outcomes?
I think there's a couple, but the biggest one that really stands out is I see a lot of organizations, they stop at adoption. They get the ceremonies in, they stand up their agile teams, but they really fail to drive that all the way through to outcomes. And so they really don't end up realizing the full value of what an agile transformation can do. They stop it at the team level or even the art level if they're in safe. Can think of a bank that I was working with, and they had, figured out what their teams were. They figured out what their value streams were. They built all this alignment. They had a lot of excitement about doing it, and they were doing the stand-ups, but unfortunately, they didn't change their downstream processes. So all their teams were working in a different way, but they still were only releasing software a couple times a year. The customers weren't noticing any changes. It wasn't any faster or easier for the customers to use their systems. And so, the bank's like, well, Agile doesn't work. We're not getting anything different than we'd already done. But it wasn't
Mm,
that Agile wasn't working. It was they didn't realize that they had to finish, right? They had to change their entire system of how they were releasing software, when they were releasing software, and what they were actually doing. And so it was a kind of a lifestyle change, a whole mentality that they had to change. And once they kind of had that realization, they really took a hard look at their downstream processes from their teams and realized that that's where the outcomes for their business were coming. It was what they got to the customer, when they got to the customer, did the customer like it, was the customer able to use it? And they started to adopt a model that was much more like what we're used to today with our phones, where you just get updates to your phone and you don't really realize it. You might have a
mm.
big one every now and again, but you get daily updates constantly. When was the last time you even had to update Microsoft, right? You don't do that anymore. And so the bank started to roll out these small incremental changes, and that's when they really began to realize the true value of safe and what they were getting for their agility.
Right. I think what you mentioned about all the changes that they've made not getting adopted downstream, it's a bit like they're trying to adopt it, but they're continually on a treadmill, right? It's
Yeah,
just running and running, and it's you're not really arriving,
that's
right?
exactly it. They were going really, really fast. They were going really, really hard, but they never got anywhere. They never asked
Yeah,
the question, what is the outcome that we actually want to achieve?
right. That's a good metaphor. So, what mindset shift flips that script from making sure that you focus on the outcome from a business perspective?
It really is starting at the leadership level and leaders
Yeah.
taking a minute and really asking themselves, what do I want to get from doing Agile? Because if you're doing Agile just because everybody else is doing it, why? Right? Now you're just like everybody else. So, what do you actually really want to get from it? And what is it going to mean to your organization to have agility? And so, when you start to look at those questions, that really becomes your driver of why you're focusing, right? It's looking at your OKRs. Just if you have
Mm,
a bunch of teams that are developing code, but again, you're not getting that bang for the buck from it. Why are you doing it? So all you've done is create a lot of disruption in your organization. And so it's not looking at the activities that the teams are doing. It's not looking at the lines of code that are getting written, how fast they're getting written, even improvements in quality. It's really looking at what do we need to do as a company? What do we need to do as an organization to stay relevant in the market, to stay in touch with our customer, to grow our customer base and our business? What do our customers need or want? I
Right.
remember, there's a story about Steve Jobs, and none of us knew we needed an iPod until he showed it to us. So the
Yeah.
question I ask you from a business perspective, and the question business owners and leaders of organizations have to ask themselves is, what do my customers need that I can give them that they don't even know they need or want from me? And when you start to look at that way, then you can work backwards to what do we need to do to get there? What do we need to do to increase customer retention by 15%? What do we need to
Mm,
do to increase sales by 20%? I guarantee it's not your agile teams. There are other things that
mm,
surround that, and your agile teams are supporting your ability to reach those goals. So agility in and of itself isn't a goal. It's what do you want your
right.
business outcomes to be, and then asking and backing into what do our agile teams need to do to deliver that for us.
Right. There's so many layers there actually to unpack. And definitely the thing for leaders is to start with clear, measurable objectives,
Mhm.
OKRs tied to business goals. And Lindy, can you break down value streams for our listeners, for those who are not very well versed with
Yeah.
it?
So our value streams is simply the set of steps that we go through, and that to achieve a goal. So SAFe recognizes two different value streams, and I'm going to talk from a leadership perspective um, about our organizational value stream. And the simple way to describe it is the technical steps that your customer goes through to acquire your product. So if you think about a bank loan, right? The customer decides they need a mortgage, right? Then they're gonna do a quick application. They're gonna go through, some underwriting, decision to make the loan. We're then gonna, award the loan, right? The customer's happy. They go buy their house. They repay the loan. Ultimately, we as the bank would get profit, right? Those steps there would be the steps in our organizational value stream. So it's simply just the set of steps that we go through in our each of our organizations. We have many value streams, processes, steps that we go through along the way. Our development teams, our agile teams have a set of steps that they go through as well, which we would have be our development value stream. But from a business leader perspective, understanding what are all the things that my customer has to do to get our product,
Mm,
where are all the places that I touch my customer throughout that value stream, throughout those steps. So thinking about this mortgage loan example, right? I interact with them from a marketing perspective to get them to do a mortgage from me. I interact with them along the way throughout the quote process, the hand holding as we go through the application and the underwriting. And then I'm still continuing to interact with them once the mortgage is awarded, and then even subsequently as they're making payments. And so as a business owner or leader or CEO, uh, understanding those customer touch points is crucial, because when we understand who our customer is, what they want, and really what drives them to do business with us and not Tom down the street, that's what gives us
mm,
that marketable difference to help make sure that we stay in business, that we're the ones that the customers think of first when they need a
right,
mortgage in this example.
right. So yeah, from a marketing lens, which is where I'm coming from, first thing that's coming to mind is branding, but there's
Mhm.
so many of the, to stay top of mind and say, why will someone choose us versus somebody else down the street? But yes, every little interaction along the value stream is what leaders really need to pay attention to. So Lindy, from what you said, okay, it's the end-to-end workflows delivering value to customers. Um, and yes, when teams really understand their role in across these touch points, then they're able to optimize for impact and not just look at it as tasks, right? Um, what frameworks or tools would you recommend um, for linking daily work to strategy and tracking progress?
That's the question that everybody asks. And there's not a good singular answer because a lot of it is going to depend on your organization. What tools you already have in place, how mature those tools are. Uh, there's a lot of different tools on the market. Many folks are familiar with Jira Align that links, your Jira stories all the way up to your strategy. Another tool that has become my favorite actually is TargetProcess, and its ability to do the same thing, I think a little simpler. But one of the things that is critical in selecting your tooling is to first understand your complete tooling environment. And then once you understand your environment, one of the biggest successes you may have is to understand what you want your end state answers to be. What answers do you want your tools to be able to give you? Do you want to be able to see for this corporate strategy, we had these 10 chunks of work that we need to do. Within these 10 chunks of work, they break down into 1,000 little pieces. Do I want to see all those 1,000 little pieces, or is the 10 chunks of work sufficient? And so once you start to understand that from a corporate perspective, what is the end goal that I'm trying to get to? You understand what your current tool stack is, then you're able to look at what tools do I have today that already do this, and I just don't have implemented correctly. What tools do I need to go get? And will those tools play with my existing tooling?
Mm.
And or what changes do I have to make to my existing tooling? So a customer that I've worked with recently, they elected to implement TargetProcess, but that was the end state. We started looking at the tooling. One of the things that we did with this customer is they had a Jira instance, just like everybody else's Jira instance. Jira out of the box, you have stories and features in the same Jira project. And the challenge with that from a safe perspective, I will say, is that within SAFE, we say that you might have multiple teams working on a single feature to deliver value. But if Jira constrains that you have a feature sitting on one team's board, it's kind of weird for another team to work on that same feature. So we made
Mm.
a conscious decision to split features into their own project type. So teams have story type projects, arts have feature type projects, and then we layered capabilities and epics on top of that from a solution train and then strategy perspective. And what we were able to do by doing that is now we can have multiple teams that have some dependencies between and be able to work and deliver that same feature. Now, Jira, it's really hard to see that hierarchy. And this is where we layered TargetProcess on top of it because it does a really good job of drawing that hierarchical picture of these stories linked to this feature, these features linked to this capability, these capabilities linked to this epic. And so it gave us that top to bottom view so we can understand how much work is left, how much work has been done. We have prioritization levels in there. And that driver, the secret that really caused the success in that organization was the splitting of the stories and the features. Now, to do that, we made a new instance of Jira, declared Jira bankruptcy, and only brought over the work that we knew we needed to do. Because many of us, many of our organizations, we have hundreds of thousands of stories, none of which we are ever going to do. And so by declaring a little bit of backlog bankruptcy and really driving forward into, let's start with a new clean instance. Was there a little bit of work to move? Yes. But it was worth it because we got that end state of where we wanted to go. And the leaders, laid out the thing of, or laid out the end state of, we want to be able to see what are the 10 biggest things we are working on and how are we progressing across those 10 biggest things, epics in this
Right.
example. So that was what that end state was. And again, we backed ourselves into that. And so I think I'm beginning to sound like a bit of a broken record in that understand what your end needs to be and then start to
Yep.
work backwards of what it's going to take to get there.
Right. So this term really caught my attention. Say backlog bankruptcy. It sounds a bit like spring cleaning. Is it something that you might want to revisit every so often to kind of clean up your whole backlogs org wide.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I have worked with other companies where we do behind the scenes backlog cleanup. So
Wow.
what I've done in other in with some companies is put rules into Jira, that automation
Mm,
rules that basically say, look, if this story has not been updated, so it's not been opened, it's not been changed, it's not, the state hasn't moved, nothing, right? It's just
wow.
sitting in a backlog and it's not been touched in 6 months, archive it. Because our backlogs age like bread, not wine. They're not getting better with age. And so if you think about the amount of waste that we have in our backlogs of, oh, that's a really great idea, that's a really great story, throw out the backlog, right? That's the equivalent of, when you were a kid and your mom or your dad says, go ask your other parent, right? Go ask your mother. That's an automatic no, right? We as companies, though, we do the same
Right.
thing. Oh, well, let's put it in the backlog, right? It is never
Yeah.
getting done. I promise you. But so what we need to do
Yes.
is really spend some time, and to your point, Christabel, do spring cleaning or put in
Yeah.
automation that does the spring cleaning for ourselves. I promise you that if there's a story that you spring clean or you declare bankruptcy on and wipe it away, and it's that important, it will come back. Or it's already in there
Yeah. Right.
2 or 3 times, just with slightly different flavors. And
Right.
so, having those rules to declare bankruptcy, to have the automation to archive old stuff, better yet, delete it. That scares a lot of people though. But
Yeah.
by doing those things, it's find the things that bring you joy, to quote Marie Kondo,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Keep the
I
things that
mean,
bring
even
you
just, yeah, even just speaking about it is bringing me so much joy. It's
joy.
like a magic wand.
Yep. Yeah.
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 Another trick kind of with that is folks ask, well, how big should my backlog be? And
Hmm.
you can apply some bad math, to it. And by looking at, well, how many stories does your team get done, each sprint? And then multiply that by, if you have more than a year's worth of work, anything beyond a year is
Hmm.
probably wasteful. You're not going to go back and
Yes.
look at it, do that spring cleaning once a year. And so if you
Yeah.
do, 10 stories every sprint and you have, what, 26 sprints in a year, if you have more than
Hmm.
260-ish stories, in your backlog,
Right.
might want to think about it.
Hmm.
Maybe do some rounding, call it 300. But anything beyond that kind of 300 mark for a team, you're
Hmm.
never going to go look at those stories. You're never going to go look at that work. And when you want to find a story that you need to pull
Yeah.
forward, you're wasting a lot of time hunting and pecking
Yeah.
through all 300 of those items. So,
Yes.
apply some bad math, and keep a reasonable size
Right.
backlog. And if you don't need it, throw it away. It's okay. It'll come
Yeah.
back if you need it again.
Yes. Yeah. I think this spring cleaning is a really good analogy over there because it's the equivalent of clutter, right? Then
Mhm.
what's important gets lost in the clutter.
Absolutely.
Yes. So again, a lot of this teams will look for direction, look to the leadership for direction. And a lot of this actually comes down to the culture and the direction of leadership. So I want to ask you what cultural or leadership challenges in all the projects that you've worked on do you observe the most, which often block all the efforts going into lean agile transformation?
I think the biggest is the expectation that the teams are going to change, that they need to work in a different fashion, but my world as a leader needs to operate exactly the same way. If
Mm.
you change all the inner workings underneath you, so to speak, you have a false reality if you think your world isn't going to change too. And there's a sentiment among a lot of leaders that, well, what got me here worked, right? I'm successful as a leader because I do things this certain way. Or it's these 10 things that I've built my career upon, built my success upon, and I don't want to give those 10 things up. And as a good leader, you have to change with the times too. Our world is changing faster than it ever has before, and so we have to be resilient. We have to be willing to change. We have to show our teams that we can change with them. And so it's really being focused on the mindset over the mechanics, right? It's not about are the teams doing good daily stand-ups. It's about are the teams actually talking with each other about the work and understanding what it's going to be. It's shifting
Right.
from that command and control to empowerment, trusting the teams, instead of asking, are you on track to deliver this plan? Maybe ask,
Mm.
what are you learning and how can I help remove obstacles? It's the same question. It just turns it on
Yeah.
its head and it gives that ability for
Yeah.
folks to think that they're cared about more. It's
Yeah.
about building trust. Teams aren't going to be honest about the risks or challenges unless the leaders create the safe space for them to talk about it. Even being vulnerable is a leader and admitting you make mistakes. It's when you start to become human to your teams will begin to trust you. Now, the hardest part of all of this is, the teams, they do a really great job of changing. I'll even
Mm.
work with executives, your C-suite sort of folks, and they're like, yeah, no, we can do this, and they're really flexible to change. But in a lot of agile transformation, what gets stuck and what gets lost is that middle management. There's a lot of
Yeah.
resistance, and it's hard for them. Their
Mm.
job as a middle manager was to make decisions. Their job as a middle
Mm.
manager was to assign work, and their job changes, right? They're maybe
Mm.
not assigning work anymore. They are, working with other things. And I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of organizations go through agile transformation is they don't actually repurpose those middle managers. They find new product owners and new scrum masters that are employee doers. And then we never give those employee doers that become our scrum masters and product owners manager training. But what those product owners and
Mm.
scrum masters are doing is your scrum master is effectively what your old team lead position kind of used to be, in a sense.
Mm.
Your
Mm.
product owner roles are figuring out what work needs to be done. And so we create this extra layer of overhead for these middle managers of, well, I don't know what my job is now because the product owners
Mm.
are telling the teams what to do. The scrum masters are making the teams better. That used to be my job. So what do I do? And
Mm.
so I'd like to challenge a lot of business leaders and business owners as they start their agile transformation of don't go try to hire scrum masters, don't go try to hire new product owners.
Mm.
Look at your middle managers first because they're your
Right.
candidates that already have those skills. You've already invested in them
Mm.
to
Right.
teach them to be leaders, to teach them to drive teams to success, to, help them understand what work needs to be done and how to prioritize work. Those are the things that the teams all struggle with the most because we don't spend enough time and effort training those scrum masters on the soft skills of people interactions that we
Mm.
provide to our team leads. We don't spend enough time with our product owners. We teach them how to write stories, but we don't teach them really
Mm.
how to understand what the big picture is and how to break up the work so that it can be delivered in smaller chunks. And so when we look
Mm.
at our organizations, understanding the challenges of middle management are going to be key so that we don't lose them, so they don't create bottlenecks, so they don't create
Yeah.
challenges, and really spend time and effort in redefining their role will set you up for success. The teams will change and pivot. Senior leaders often will change and pivot, but those middle managers, they lose themselves. And whatever we can do to help
Mm.
them find themselves or keep themselves is going to be successful.
Right. And what is your recommendation to empower this layer of middle managers?
I think it's giving them those roles, not finding,
Mm.
scrum masters, not finding new
Yeah.
product owners from outside the organization. Don't try to hire those in. It's a repurpose of the role, not a go find net new. And I think that's one of
Right.
our biggest challenges that many organizations have is they're like, oh, well, I need scrum masters and product owners. I don't have those jobs in my
Mm.
organization. I'm going to go hire them. You have
Mm.
them. They're just not called
Right.
that. And so
Yeah.
it's again, let's go back to what is that end state that we're trying to drive toward? And then how do
Mm.
I make things fit along the way with what I currently have? Right? You have great employees. Don't go hire new ones to go through an agile transformation. Find some coaches, find some consultants to come in, help drive that success, to help you with what you don't know, right? That they have the expertise in Agile, they have the expertise in organizational transformation, change management. Bring in those experts temporarily to help reposition, reorganize, redrive the changes that you want to accomplish. But don't go try to hire all net new to replace
Mm,
all the wealth that you've built in your organization from what your
right.
middle managers know, what your teams know. Drive their
Mm,
success from inside. And I think that's really the secret is, you know, as a leader, you have to understand the power that you've already created in your organization. Your challenge is how to harness it to go to operate in a slightly more efficient manner. It's
mm,
almost like um, you know, giving your car a tune-up. You go to the
mm,
mechanic and they spend a little bit of time and they make sure that, all of the work is done so that the car is operating as
right.
efficiently as possible. And that's your job as a leader in an organization, is to make sure that your engine hums. And so,
Mm,
what are the things you need to do? Well, you got to change the oil every now and again, right? You have to make
mm,
sure you're putting in good quality gas. You need to do the tune up to swap out and update the spark plugs and those sorts of things. But you're not
mm,
throwing out the engine every time you
right.
do that. You're making these
Right.
small adjustments along the way. And that's what you
Right.
have to do with your leaders and your middle managers in your organization, is that small adjustments along the way.
Right. So you very likely have all the components that you already need. Just
Mhm.
find a way to remove that friction and provide the clarity to your teams and empower your layer of middle management. Yes.
Mhm.
Lindy, now shifting gears into um, how with lean agile enterprises can accelerate impact and efficiency. So how does agile really help accelerate market speed without sacrificing quality or increasing risk?
So Agile by itself won't. And that's the trick, right? Agile by itself is not
Mm,
going to make your business better. You have to fundamentally change your overarching culture, because you have to go,
mm,
but kind of goes back to what we started our conversation with a little bit of, it, what is the outcome you want to achieve? Right? So if it's, increased revenue, increased sales, whatever that may be, right? That's what you're going to drive toward. What Agile is going to do is it is going to put a big magnifying glass on your problem areas. So,
mm,
what you're going to start to see when you talk about speed and quality and risk is there's going to be things that are going to bubble up. I'm going to tell you they've always been there, but because of
right.
how we were operating as an organization, we were able to sweep them under the rug, right? They
Mm,
kind of got smoothed over, they just kind of worked. Or we had enough, waste in the system that we could catch up along the way. With Agile, things start to move a little bit faster, but faster by itself isn't great. If you have to go back and redo work or you skip compliance things,
mm,
that speed can actually become a liability. So you have to figure out how you build those
yeah.
things into your value stream steps, right? How do I make sure when my teams are developing and building code or building software that we're doing the compliance along the way? And this is where your DevOps pipelines are going to be so critical. So you'd asked me earlier about tools you needed to invest in, and I talked about Jira and TargetProcess and Jira Align and those sorts of
Mm,
things. But the other place you have to invest money is in your DevOps tooling pipeline, making sure that it has all of the, automated regression tests. It has your compliance checks, your security checks. You have that good traceability from end to end of, here's a user story that said we need to make this update, to here's the code that was checked in, to here's what actually went into production and how that ties through. And, when you start to invest in your organization and you build out those tools, those automations, including now leveraging AI, AI can find a lot of these places where you have these gaps and really help you design, end-to-end solutions that are going to be able to create those opportunities. I think that's key. So Agile by itself isn't going to make you faster, isn't going to make you
Mm,
better. It's going to show you where those problems are. And so you have to figure out, well, what does speed mean for me? How frequently can I, should I, do I need to release? You know, what risks am I willing to take? Are there things that I've been doing because we've always done it that way? Because one
mm,
time at band camp, this one thing happened, and so now we all take our shoes off at the airport, right? You know, we've built these things into our systems
mm,
at our offices and our corporations. And so it's
mm,
taking a look at what are those steps, you know? Do we have to do time tracking for each project cost? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And so those are the things you're going to start to take a look at from a risk perspective as well. The other thing I think with this is you have to look at quality and taking the time to build in quality as an enabler. It's not a penalty, it's not a tax. You know, by building in quality, by leveraging automation, by investing in your automation tools, by putting in test first approaches, you're actually going to, in the long term, reduce your risk. And so, but teams see this as, well, this
mm,
is extra that we have to do above and beyond. And you've never given me time
mm,
to do this before. I have no confidence that you're going to give me the time to do this now. And so, as a
mm,
leader, it's really shifting that mindset again of how do we create sustainable flow with confidence, right? How can we be sure that we are getting things out the door as we need to, that they have the quality that we want, that they're going to meet our customers' expectations, and that it's not a rush every weekend
mm,
to make sure everything is
mm,
perfect. How do we get it so
mm,
that it's just a click of a button and it automatically deploys and it does so with confidence? Like we don't question that it's not going to work or that we're going to have to roll back, you know, that we're doing these micro releases that are smaller, that are just, you know, it's as simple for us as walking out and putting the key in the car and starting the engine. It's no more complicated. We don't think every time we go start a car. We don't give a
mm,
second thought. And so what we want
mm,
to do is we want to get our DevOps pipelines and our developers and our testers and our organization that they deploy code to production without giving it a second thought because we've built in the quality all along the way. We've had that
mm,
complete confidence that, you know, I can go release this and it's not going to be an all weekend, all nighter, stay up, you know,
mm.
till dawn, making sure that everything operates smoothly and effectively and efficiently. And I think that's the biggest change that, you know, we have to do when we look at agility is how do we balance those? But it really comes back to investment again, investing in our
Right.
people, investing in the technology, investing in the pipelines that let us get things out the door, and ultimately trusting our folks to deliver those right things and giving them the time and space to build the quality in. That's going to be the key. And it comes back to that culture change of, you know,
Mm,
how do we deliver sustainably with confidence? You know, ask your teams, what would it take for you to be able to release code every weekend and not feel like you have to be on the call when the code goes in every weekend to make sure
mm,
nothing breaks? They will have
right.
an answer. Are you willing to
Mm,
listen to them? And are you willing to be able to remove those roadblocks and those
right.
challenges and the issues that they're running into to be able to do that? That's the question is,
Yeah.
are you willing to support your teams to drive the quality, the speed, and the balance the risk to be
Right.
able to release frequently?
Right. Creating sustainable flow with confidence. It's sounds a bit like organizational nirvana, so to speak,
Yeah.
when we're able to achieve that. But yeah, yeah, even just saying that again brings me joy, because you're doing it stress free. Teams are happy. Things are getting shipped and all of that. Yes. So, Lindy, just wanted to also understand from the decades of experience that you bring on board with these, do certain industries stand out in how well they've really adopted these practices versus some others?
I don't know that industry by industry, any industry is
Mm,
doing better or worse than any other. I
Mm.
think there's companies in industries that are doing a good job. I
Yeah.
think there's, but you can, when you look across the industries as a whole, it's a
Mm.
bell curve for how well they have or haven't
True.
implemented Agile. I
Mm.
think if we think of Agile as the flip side of a coin to lean manufacturing, I think our
Mm.
manufacturing organizations have a much better handle on streamlining operations than
Mm.
would an industry like banking or hospitals in
Mm.
that regard. It's, there's long been a focus on making sure that, manufacturing is as efficient as can be because it's expensive. I don't know that we've really had a lot of
Mm.
that aha for making sure that we, lean out our development operations, so to speak,
Mm.
in the same way, which is really what Agile is driving toward. It's,
Mm.
a little different in that, from a manufacturing line, we repeat the exact same task the exact same way over and over and over
Right.
again.
Mm.
In software
It's more
development,
about efficiency then.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
In software development, what we get to is we want similar tasks, but they're never the same. And so it's
Yeah.
how do we build habits? How do we build patterns that create a similarity to a manufacturing line,
Mm.
but recognizing that, the line itself for software development has to be smart enough to know I'm putting in, 3 screws with 5 bolts and 6 washers this time, and next time it's, a different size bolt with a different size washer and 3 other, components, that it's still going through the stations, but the configuration in each station change, and our software developers are the ones that are smart enough to know what those new configurations need to be. And so it's creating, the similarities where we can, creating those
Mm.
efficiencies, removing the
Right.
waste from the system
Yeah.
and trusting that when it lands at this developer's station, so to speak, right, that
Mm.
they're able to build and develop and complete what they need to do. They're able to test it. And ultimately, they're the ones that can push that code out the door because we have all the rest of the assembly line behind them that is, checking to make sure that it's right, that we don't have any vulnerabilities, that the quality is there, so that we've gone through and we've reduced that risk. And so that's kind of the secret that lies there is it goes back to trust, but ultimately understanding what we want our outcome to be.
Right. Um, Now, Lindy, for leaders ready to transform outcomes, what's your top advice?
Figure out what you want your end state to be, and then bring in some consultants that have done organizational transformation, agile transformation before to help guide you through the process. And note, it is not going to be a 3-month sort of thing. We are talking about a fundamental shift in the organization. And so you're going to spend 3 months kind of figuring out, making sure you're aligned on what you want your end state to be, understanding what your current systems are from your people organization systems, your software organization
Mm.
systems, your operational value stream systems, what tooling you have in place, and then, devising that plan for what does it look like for us to back into that plan. So, trusting your trusted advisors that you're bringing in to do this. Um, so it's understand your outcome. You're going to invest in then developing your leaders, right? What do we need to do to move our middle management forward? How are we going to set them up for success? I think we then need to recognize the disruption that it's going to cause as we start to make this transformation with our teams, within our organization, and make sure that we don't have folks in the trenches that feel like they have to firefight every single thing. Set them up for success. Have those folks that are in the trenches making the changes have their back, and make sure that from a leadership perspective, you are present, that you are there, you're the front line, you're the general leading the charge, and that folks see
Mm.
you making that same concerted effort, that it's not just lip service. And that has to be a trickle effect. You as the leader, you set the tone, you set the stage. And then, you put your middle managers in the position to be able to drive that change by being the scrum masters and the product owners. Then you set up your teams for success by making sure they have the right tooling in place, from both, Jira tracking stories sort of thing to, the DevOps pipeline tools that they need to be able to deploy code, invest in your environment and your cloud systems and your software. Uh, it's a fundamental change to probably how you operate every day. And ultimately, before you embark on this, you have to decide as a leader of your organization, is this something you're willing to underdo and take on, knowing it's going to be an 18 to 24-month journey at the least, or at the very least?
Mm.
Um, it's never a question of how agile are we? It's, are we achieving the outcomes that we set forth that we wanted to accomplish? And is agile helping us get there? It's that shift in question, right? It's not about how agile are we. This goes back to kind of
Mm.
where we started today, Christabel, and
Yeah,
that, you can't measure agility. I can measure
yeah,
outcome.
yeah,
I can measure,
right.
are we getting releases to our customer faster? Are our customers happy? Have we increased sales? Do we improve retention? When we do agile correctly, we take those strategies and they become the results. It's not just a ceremony, it's not just a checklist. It really is, those are the things that are those patterns and those habits that get us those outcomes that we articulated from the front that we wanted to achieve and accomplish.
That's so beautifully put, Lindy. And I think we touched on a few of those things in today's session. So thank you. It's such a gold mine of wisdom over there that's unlocked for us, and thank you for doing that. Um, Agile is it's clear. It's a means towards a meaningful business outcomes, which is the end. And for all of us, and certainly leadership, to keep that as the North Star moving forward. All right. So, Lindy, and thank you so much for being here, taking the time to do this. Any last words you have for our listeners, and especially for leadership?
I think just one thing, when we look at agile transformation, it's not about doing agile. It's really about being
Mm.
outcome driven. And
Mm.
that's the thing we just have to keep in mind. What is the outcome we want to achieve? It's not about doing agile or being agile. It's, what is the outcome that we want to accomplish by doing the heavy lift to go through the transformation.
Yes. Thank you for that, Lindy. This has been a wonderful time, really unpacking all of these things that I'm sure we're going to keep revisiting from time to time.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for having
much.
me. I appreciate it.